This is Movies, a podcast about the act of cinema, and Hans is not with me today. Hans is a very sleepy boy this evening because he's got to wake up and go to his day job at 5:30 in the morning. I'm not used to him pressing for earlier times like he has been on these last couple of shows, but it's becoming very inconvenient, which it is what it is. We got two guests tonight, so we got usual roundup of people here. We have J. David Osborne, and we have Kelby Losack. How are you fellas doing? The host of the Agitator podcast.
Doing good.
Doing
Excellent.
great, doing great. You missed it. The perfect intro just drove by, had like sirens going down the street and shit. It was like, oh fuck. That would have
Uh,
been tight. Oh, actually, damn, they went the other way. There was some more, but
that's constantly happening. I live in Queens, and I live like a couple of blocks from the project, so there's just constantly sometimes helicopters going around outside looking for people, police cars going off. It's very troublesome. Yeah. So, where are you guys based out of?
I'm in Texas. I'm in the Gulf Coast, dirty South, south of Houston. Uh, got the best of all worlds. We got swamp, beach, city, all kinds of shit.
It's very
So
well rounded.
yeah, it's a well-rounded place. I like it and I hate it because hurricanes be fucking my shit up all the time.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm in Oklahoma City. I've lived in Oklahoma for probably the majority of my life, and I've just been all over. I could give you all the details of all the different Oklahoma towns that I lived in, but I think that that would probably not be very interesting. So I'm in OKC. It's cool, man. It's cool. We have good restaurants. We have I live close to a Chick-fil-A and a Taco Bell, so we got all the good shit.
Nice. For some reason, I was under the impression you were in the Pacific Northwest. Did you ever live out there?
I did, yeah. I lived in Portland for a while. I lived there for 3 years. That was my adventure outside of Oklahoma. I needed to get away, so I moved to a suburb there. I drove an ice cream truck in Portland for quite some time, and then I worked as a concierge at Fountain Plaza downtown. And since this is the movies podcast, that was the place that I was where I was in my only movie that I've ever been in, which was called Green Room. I was
Oh,
one of the
nice.
Nazis in Green Room.
That rules. That's a great movie to make a debut in. My first movie was Goodwill Hunting, and I'm nowhere to be
What?
found in that movie. Yeah, I was a little boy. They were
Oh,
shooting
okay.
it in my neighborhood, and I remember everybody was so excited to see Robin Williams when that was happening, and nobody gave a shit about Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Everybody was just crowded around Robin Williams getting autographs and all that. Ben Affleck and
Hmm.
Matt Damon were just nobodies
Yeah,
at that time.
yeah, yeah.
Green Rooms, that movie. I'm a pretty big fan of what's that filmmaker? Jeremy Saulnier, right?
Yeah. So I got to throw a beer, like one of those sugar beer bottles at Anton Yelchin in the movie.
Hmm.
But when it was set up, I was scared as fuck because, I showed up and I was one of the extras, and everybody showed up in all their like punk gear. And then
Hmm.
they figured out who wants to play one of the neo Nazis, and nobody wanted to do it except for me. So they shaved my head, and I got to do some cool shit because I was the only one willing to to do that.
Hmm.
But it was really intimidating actually because I'd never been on a film set before, and you have this big crane camera in your face, and I'm not super athletic. So even though I just had to literally throw this beer bottle at like a blanket that they had set up, I was
Hmm.
like shitting my pants. Like, what if I fuck this up and
Had you
looks stupid?
had you ever been bald before? Because that would be my concern. Is I would feel like shit. What if my head is so misshapen and I just look like one of like what is that Goonies monster?
Sloth. Yeah,
Sloth. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
yeah.
big risk too.
I have been
Um,
bald before. I used to work at Eddie Bauer, and I went in, and my manager was this black lady, and I came in bald one day, and she was not fucking with it. She was like, "You look racist." I was like, "Well, you know."
You look racist. Ever
I
since,
think I like to think that that's why they picked me, because when I'm bald, I look super racist. Some people just have racist face,
mhm.
and I guess I have that.
Wow, well, that's perfect for that film. I was a big fan of Blue Ruin as well. I didn't really enjoy that third movie he did that Macon Blair wrote that went directly to Netflix. I think it was called Hold the Dark.
No, that was a mess.
Yeah, I thought so as well. For whatever reason, it just seemed very tonally inconsistent, especially comparing like the first half of the movie with the second half. Is he up to anything lately? Has he done anything new? I know he was supposed to do season 3 of True Detective,
Hmm.
and then something fell through with that. Maybe it was like a conflict with Nick Pizzolatto, and I think he only wound up doing a couple episodes instead.
Well, if he had a conflict with Nick Pizzolatto, that makes a lot of sense because Nick Pizzolatto has fucking conflict with everybody.
Mm,
He's a really difficult dude to see. It's because Kelby and I are from the crime world, so we kind of knew all these people before they blew up. So I was like friends with Nick Pizzolatto, friends, right? Facebook friends
sure.
with this guy, like before, and he's always been in crime fiction. There's this subgenre of person called the crime fiction dad who's in their mid 40s and likes to drink whiskey and talk about like, oh, if anybody ever came after my kids, I'd go on a ramp, like that kind of grim dark.
Sure.
Ben Percy's another person who's like this. He's a writer who talks with this like really fake deep, like he's been gargling glass accent or whatever. But with Saulnier, I think that there was a TV show that wasn't True Detective for a while, but I don't know, man. He might have just gotten fucking chewed up by that system, which I think happens kind of a lot.
I think he's got, I don't know if I'm breaking any news here. I think he's got some sort of Western TV show he's trying to work out with Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire company. They have a subsidiary called Bonfire Legend, which used to be Cinestate before that. And a friend of mine and I had scripts tied up with Cinestate before the whole Me Too scandal happened.
Uh-huh.
And when that fell apart, obviously everything's off the table. They rebranded as Bonfire Legend, did the home invasion movie Shut In, which brought Vincent Gallo out of retirement. And it seems like their scripted film division hasn't really taken off. They also did the documentary, and this is like the only popular one that wound up sticking at all. What is a Woman, which is the Matt Walsh kind of like conservative Christian right wing.
Yeah.
We're gonna question all like these academics about what is a woman. Seems like their film division's not really taking off, and their next attempt is going to be maybe a series, since Yellowstone is the big thing at the moment, and Nick Pizzolatto seems like the guy that they want to shepherd that and be like showrunner or whatever.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. I always thought that he might lean that way, but that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I didn't watch. I turned True Detective season 2 off after the second episode because the first episode did something that I thought was really bold, where Colin Farrell gets shotgunned in the chest by a guy in a bird mask, and I
Yeah.
thought that was so cool and such an interesting direction because it had this Lynchian like tease, right? That he was going to be in this kind of, red room, otherworld thing. And I thought that that was what they were going to do for the rest of the series, like mix in the cop stuff with like a more kind of Lynchian angle. And then when he woke up in episode 2 and it's like, oh, thank God I had a bulletproof vest on so I can take a shotgun blast point blank to the chest. I was like, not for me.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, you can't. I've worn different bulletproof vests before. I'm not taking a shotgun to the fucking chest.
I do remember them bringing him back for that episode because I had a very similar reaction, and I was, it was conflicting because I felt like he was the most interesting part of that show, but to pull the whole Marvel Studios, hey, he's still alive kind of ruse after that, I wasn't a big fan of that. I did revisit season 2 of True Detective, I think in 2020. Just during quarantine when there was nothing to do, going through a bunch of different TV shows. I had a much warmer opinion of it the second time that I watched it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, still nothing compares to that first season. Now they're doing it without him. Now there's going to be a fourth season that doesn't even have Nick Pizzolatto writing the script. I don't know who's helming it at the moment. I think it's like Barry Jenkins or...
I thought it was a
something like
girl. I thought they got a girl to do it, right?
Yeah. The director is going to be a female. I think the producer and maybe the writer is a well-known guy. I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I think that I didn't see season 3.
Mhm.
I do think that season 1 was really good TV though. I really liked season 1. It mixed in those Lovecraft elements just the right amount with the Yellow King and everything like that. And I thought they got a lot of the kind of feel for that southern Louisiana, kind of, cicadas always chirping kind of atmosphere down really good.
Mhm.
And of course Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson are just really good as a buddy cop duo. So I liked season 1 a lot, but that was where it ended for me.
Do you feel like for you two, noir is your top genre as far as film or literature?
Some kind of niche subset of noir always. I'd say probably, yeah.
Okay. Uh, so what is your backstory, Kelby? Because I'm more familiar with you, J. David Osborne, because I was kind of in a peripheral circle to you when you were doing a lot of the publishing way back in the day. Because I founded Clash Books under my real name, and then
Mm-hmm.
that got taken over by I think you know Christoph and Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
They run that now, and I just kind of bounced and I washed my hands of the whole
Hmm.
literary scene and wound up here. So
I didn't know that. I know
yeah,
Christoph and Lisa really well. I had no idea that you were involved in Clash.
I created it as mine.
Wow.
But they don't put my name on the website for whatever reason. I mentioned that to them too. Um, Myself and Joel and Matt Guel, who's a Spanish artist, founded that in I think like 2015 or so.
Wow.
Yeah, it was my one contribution. It was really just like I want to start a press so I can just put my own books out without like
Yeah.
self-publishing stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. And then I was like, all right, I'm bored of this. You guys can handle everything from
I've
here.
I've known Lisa for like 10 years and I've known Christoph for almost that much time. And so that's always kind of colored how I looked at Clash books. But
Mm.
knowing that you started it makes me like it a little bit more.
Yeah, I do know that our homie Grant Womack, who just dropped Black Gypsies with Broken River, he's part of the kind of collective that we got going on. He and Christoph had this thing, what they call it back in the day before it was like New English literature, I think
Mm.
is what it was. And then that he told me that it folded, that Christoph, they parted ways, whatever, and it folded into Clash. He said got uh he bought it from somebody or whatever. I remember this other entity, which now we're finding out is you,
Wow.
who
So wait, so
who
he
is
he you sold it to him? Is
I
that how
didn't
that
se-
worked?
no, I didn't sell it at all. I just kind of was like, this is, it was around the same time that I started getting into making short films and comedy sketches. So I created a couple of YouTube channels. I started going under the pseudonym Lores Wonderbread. And prior to that, I had put out a novel in 2013, and then I put out a novella through the Clash name, and I published a couple of people under Clash in 2015 and maybe early 2016. And at that point, I was just kind of like, I was working with Christoph at the time. He had just brought in Lisa, and I was like, I don't really have anything as far as like an idea of where to take this. If you want to just keep doing your thing with it for the time being, have at it. There was never like a formal thing like Clash is yours. It just became that way, and I was like, well, I'm not really writing any. I'm not interested in writing books. I'm interested in shooting and getting better versed with the camera, and collaborating with people in like a visual medium. So it just evolved from there, and it's become their thing.
This is a deep piece of micro indie lit lore
Yeah, I
that
guess
is
so.
just really tickling me. Uh, I'm really enjoying this. I had no idea. Well, Clash has some good books. They have El Nash's book. They have Unathi Slash's book, which is good. I used to criticize Clash in the early days for not really having a solid identity. I didn't really know what it was that they were trying to do with that. It seemed like clout chasing, like just
Mm.
kind of whatever they could do to kind of get books out there. But I think that now that it's all kind of stabilized, I actually don't really I don't have really a bad thing to say about them necessarily. It was a rough start that kind of evened its way out.
I mean, I don't know. I never pictured that the publishing house that I founded would be like a big hub for LGBTQ, trans, everything. But I don't know. I kind of got the right lighting for that today. This is very bisexual.
Yeah, you do.
lighting on
You
my
do.
behalf.
Yeah, you got some pretty bisexual ass pinks and blues.
But you know, it's you know, even though I don't have like a part of it now, it's kind of interesting. It's just like a third party perspective to see how that's where that started and where that is right now. But yeah, why don't we get?
I knew
off
they
of,
didn't come up with Clash books on their own. I knew that wasn't them. I knew that
Well,
that was. Are they your friends?
You know, we were good friends for a while, and I haven't really spoken to either one of them in quite some time. But it wasn't like any sort of you know, clash that occurred between us or anything of that matter. Just kind of, you know, distancing, I suppose.
Cool. Yeah.
You know, my scene's very different from what their scene currently is. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot of overlap there.
Right. Well, you're the LGBTQ king now. The
Yeah,
godfather
right.
of the Liga Biga Tiga fucking squad.
Yeah, I need a good hefty paycheck is what I'm thinking after this conversation. I don't know. I might have to get a piece back in on that. I never formally agreed to, you know, forfeit it. But listen,
You could.
Maybe I could. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We're going to be talking a little bit about you know, reading tonight. What a different kind of reading subtitles on a film. So we are talking about a film released in June in Korea, has not been formally released in America yet or in the West. We're talking about Decision to Leave, which is Park Chan-wook's latest movie. I am curious to get you guys' opinion on Park Chan-wook. I know on your Agitator podcast, you mostly cover, it seems like, Japanese films. Seems like the big hang-up is Japanese movies. I have to say Korean films are more my forte, my specialty. So, you know, as far as Japanese directors go, I've talked a whole lot about like Takashi Kitano on this program before. I'm a big fan of him. Certainly a lot of his sensibilities I had in my head when I was doing Mass State Lottery, and just how he, you know, does the crime genre and police procedural films in such a weird and unique way. But for those who are listening to this program, why don't you just tell my audience a little bit about Agitator, the podcast, so they can give that a listen.
So Agitator is started off with David and I. We talk on the phone like all the time. We're two dads, artists. We're both, you know, part of the what Broken River developed into, just this writing like collective of just homies putting out each other's shit and hyping it up, like a literary Wu-Tang or whatever. And yeah, we're bros. So we chat all the time and just decided to sort of explore why Mike is such a big idol to us in podcast form, because that was a big, like, the things we talk about in Agitator, the movies and shit that we talk about was just part of our conversations in general. And we did the first episode. I think it was like a month later, we decided to talk. I wanted to talk about Visitor Q. I wanted to just, you know, jump in the deep end with the nasty pervy shit. And it was like a month after that we did Itchy the Killer, and then it was like, okay, let's do this thing. And it's what it's turned into is kind of like a developing like a live art manifesto through the lens of, or the filter of, Japanese cinema and anime and shit, and now rap as well, because we have, like, we've always had rappers on, like, kind of from the beginning, and now it's like we're having the entire POW records label on through September and October. So it's kind of just turned into this anime hip-hop culture thing that's also a way for us to shill our shit and sort of develop our craft through the podcast format.
Now, yeah, we like to talk about, you know, things like you know, cultural appropriation, because it's Japanese movies that are largely influenced by you know, Western cinema and earlier Eastern cinema. And, a lot of them are very DIY. A lot of them have an aesthetic sensibility that's very different from Western cinema. And it's really been a good and inspiring project for me in my own writing, because through talking to Kelby over the 60 episodes that we've done so far, we've kind of been able to suss out what it is we actually like about storytelling, and what we like about certain visuals and music, stuff that doesn't necessarily translate into writing, but that kind of has its own place in providing a jumping off point for doing that kind of thing.
Man, the Japanese love to steal, don't they? I was just reading up on. I'm not too familiar with video games, but I just got reading the Wikipedia page of Hideo Kojima, who's obviously like a very famous guy. And I had also read the book Itchy Tasty, which is about the development of the Resident Evil series when it was under the leadership of one guy, and he did Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that was it. You just notice like they just blatantly steal everything. They just take everything without any subtlety at all. Like the Snake Plissken character being the source for, the Metal Gear Solid and all that. And it's just like 1-to-1 taking it. I don't know, just something I think is amusing about that.
Right. Because we have such a stigma, and by we, I mean Westerners or, Americans, as being the originators of these things. So there's a real kind of quest for originality in the things that we create. We want to make sure that something that we create is unique and individual, much like ourselves, because we're precious Americans who are unique and individual. And, the thing that we create has to come forth from that and be its own self-sustained, hermetically sealed kind of thing. And when you get to more collective, honor-based, societally engaged societies like people who live in Tokyo, for example, where you're all just kind of rats in a maze, right? You're living on top of each other and everybody is everybody else. Everybody looks like each other, that kind of thing.
That's a great soundbite. Yeah.
You get to the point where you're like, well, why shouldn't I just take this thing? Why shouldn't I take it wholesale and make it my own? There's the concept of homage where, I recently watched Nope, and in Nope, the female protagonist does the Akira motorcycle slide in it, right? And that's an homage. But what if you took that just a step further? Because Kelby and I are working on a project which is basically Itchy the Killer 2, and our idea is to just completely steal the IP and write it. And what are they going to do? They're in Japan. Like, I don't know. There's no legal apparatus to stop us from doing that. So far as we know, I guess we'll find out.
They can sue me. I don't speak Japanese or read it. So.
Well, you would probably be targeted by whoever owns the rights in America, which I think is like Magnolia or one of these like niche companies. I was thinking, on a similar note, I've been tossing around the idea with my co-host Hans about doing like an American adaptation of Lupin the Third with him as Lupin. And they stole Lupin to begin with. They didn't have the rights to Lupin, but now Lupin is like a what's the word? A public domain character. Lupin the Third is not. But how can you differentiate these two things?
Right.
Yeah.
And Kelby and I noticed that you guys were open for script submissions, and we were tossing back and forth the idea of just rewriting the Miike film Agitator in America, and just like seeing if that had any legs. Because, I mean, just do it, and if somebody sues you, then I don't know, then they sue you. You just declare bankruptcy or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, then that's a get out of jail free card. I mean, the only reason why my production company is like a formal production company now is an LLC is because I got a cease and desist from the Massachusetts Lottery over the name of my film. They were like, we don't like this. What are you doing? There's an X rating on the trailer. You can't have the title here. So I like filed a copyright for Low Res Wonder Bread's Mass State Lottery and then formed this company. And they've been quiet in the meantime. Yeah, it just depends on how litigious people are, and if they think that they can scare you into hiding your product or getting a dime from you. But I mean, I'm not really into to filmmaking for any sort of money. I don't even like the idea of like working on other people's projects in that way just for money, which is maybe just because I have like a pretty decent day job. But you know, if it came down to it, like if the Massachusetts lottery was really hammering me, I just put the movie out on Vimeo for free or Pirate Bay or something. So I like that kind of spirit of like if you're getting attacked by one of these giants, then fuck it, who cares? Just do the thing anyway. If you want to make it, make it.
I was really inspired by my buddy Patrick Wensink, who wrote a book called Broken Piano for President. He's gone on to find massive success as a children's book author of the Go Go Gorillas series, which my son really likes.
Mine
But
too.
back in the, what's that? Oh, he does.
Mine, yeah.
But back in the day, Pat was, he wrote this book called Broken Piano for President, and they had a Jack Daniels bottle as their cover. And it was the Jack Daniels label with the title, with, you know, Pat's name. And Jack Daniels sent them a cease and desist letter, them being the publisher, which was Eraserhead Lazy Fascist was the publisher. And the cease and desist letter was so polite because Jack Daniels offered to pay them for a new cover if they changed it from Jack Daniels,
Oh, wow.
which they used that money to go to a local brewery and have them design the cover. But it went completely viral. Boing Boing published it, and then it just went crazy. And Pat ended up selling 12,000 copies off of that. So agitating and fucking with these big IPs and kind of stirring shit is actually a way to get yourself seen by people. And we have to use every trick that we can get, because Kelby and I were talking about this earlier. Like, we're pretty much like in mainstream publishing, like we're cut off because we've said things that they don't like. So we have to figure out how to, you know, we have like Jack on our podcast from the Perfume Nationalist and shit. And it's like, after that, they just sort of write you off.
I started beef with some agents at Little Brown directly. So just a little bit of that too.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really see people from like your sphere of things also engage in that perfume nationalist sphere of things. But
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of like interesting personalities in art that are coming out of that whole world, as opposed to the very corporate. This is what we consider like cutting edge or whatever literature that's going on in like indie publishing or mainstream publishing.
And it's difficult too. Yeah, it's there are people who we know who have kind of played that game, and they've played it all the way to success being big advances and, you know, movie deals with Ron Howard and stuff like that. And then it doesn't work out. And then like, where does that leave you? So you play this game for like 5 or 10 years where you pretend to think things that you don't really believe, and, you know, sort of I don't know, just put on this whole front, and then it doesn't work out. And then what do you do? Whereas Kelby and I are just constantly saying shit that we're thinking, which is not I don't know, it's not saleable.
Well, I prefer that energy 100%. I think at least with the people that I've gotten to know through this podcast and everything, that is in the long run, I think what is probably more rewarded than playing it safe, playing it corporate, is not sterilizing yourself to play the game.
Yeah, it's a long game. And what happened, I think, and this might have happened in movies too, you'd know more about this than I would, but I definitely can speak to books. What happened over the past 20 years was a kind of corporate consolidation of power. So the big 6 became the big 5, became the big 4. It got narrower and narrower and narrower. So because of that, the people who held the keys to money, exposure, distribution got smaller and smaller and smaller. So the people who wanted access to those outlets for their art became more and more specifically insane and libtarded in order to get to those things, right? But the only real answer, and I've said this over and over again, is that this is a long game. I'm 35 years old. And most of my favorite authors didn't even write their best shit until they were in their late 40s, early 50s. I have a job. Kelby has a job. Like, we're all just normal people who do normal stuff. And I'm willing to wait. I'm cool with waiting and just doing things my own way. And I don't expect to hit right now, but I think a lot of these people, they want to, right? They're very career oriented, and I'm just art oriented, I guess.
How
Yeah, the
old are you,
cringe
Kelby?
artist. I'm 29.
Okay, you're the youngest here. I'm gonna be 32 in a couple of months. So, yeah, I mean, if you take a look at a lot of directors, anyway, I definitely had this in my head uh, over the last couple of years. They don't really start getting cooking on their debut features until about the age of like 31, 32 years old. And they usually, I mean, kind of similarly, they don't hit until oftentimes their 40s. Their 40s is
Mm-hmm.
really when they start to develop a texture and create a sort of identity through their shooting and editing and whatever the genre that they take root in tends to be.
Yeah, music is the only art form that's the opposite, right? Music preys on the youth. You have to
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of youthful, I want to go out and dance and party and drink and take drugs and shit like that. Music prefers young people, but if it's movies or books or sculpture or art, or poetry, I guess nobody reads that, but poetry, it's all older people. You have to have a worldview first before you can actually write something that is interesting. So it's I'm cool with being in a kind of stasis, just writing. And when I put a book out, I don't expect anybody to read it yet because the pieces will just kind of fall together.
I think that's a good attitude to have. Oh, go ahead, Kelby.
Yeah, you build up a catalog. It's kind of like playing the lottery and working at the same time. The people who might be most successful are like the daily grinders who they pick up their ticket because they're always like, that's a big thing around here. Like, we got a lot of corner stores that are big. They got the signs out in the windows that are like, we have the highest, payoff rate in Texas or whatever. I'm like, damn, all six of you. But and everybody's always like, I mean, you don't win if you don't play, but you also go to work. And so like the the noble artist path is kind of like the same thing where it's like you just put in the work, you don't give up any part of like your soul in the process of doing the thing, but you keep at it, like your average of something hitting goes up the more you put out. Like, I'm gonna have 11 books published by the time I turn 30 in March.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's like you just keep doing the shit. And I gotta jump on, like, I'll take credit for getting David's head straight because he got out of writing for a little bit, um, giving up on the shit. But like, you uh you just got to keep swinging the sword, man. Like, it's not, there's nothing super complicated about it. And I don't know if I've been like blessed with vision or something because I've died twice, which is like a little superpower that I have. I'm
You've died
invincible.
twice. You like
Yeah,
legally pronounced dead.
yeah. Once on the I remember hearing, I don't know, like, how this memory came to be or whatever, but like, I have this memory of hearing the doctor pronounce me dead, actually, on the operating table. And then another time was in a buddy's bathroom, the one and only time I did heroin. Uh, but I forgot where I was going with that.
I don't know. I'm very interested though. So what was the operation about?
I tore two holes in my stomach from eating a lot of meth.
Oh
And
shit.
yeah, so like, they had to do a lot of I had a lot of therapy after that to get to where it still feels sometimes like I've got holes in my gut, but
Hmm.
it I had to take this like crazy ass medication too. That was like it was like $300 a bottle, and it came with 5 capsules. And that shit was like, it worked, whatever the fuck it was though. But yeah, yeah, I did a lot of drugs, sold a lot of drugs. So I guess I developed the worldview a little bit early on to kind of have that frame of mind. And for whatever reason, I'm also an art queer who wants to like write shit. So, and that's probably the number one reason I'm not welcome in the prestigious literary circle, is because no matter, I've tried even exploiting myself, being like, hey, I'm an ex dope dealer, I'm a dirty ghetto kid, whatever. They're like, that's extra why we don't want you here.
That's too interesting. That's too not what everything is that's like popular there now. You had cited that J. David Osborne here gave up on writing. Is that because of the nature that things took in the industry that you were citing, that you were talking about not long ago, or is that separate reasons?
Uh, well, I did go through a dark night of the soul for a really long time where I kind of wondered what I was doing. My issue with writing was that in indie terms, I hit really big, really early. And I think that kind of fucked me up. So my first book was called By the Time We Leave Here, We'll Be Friends. And it was set in a Russian gulag. It was a very surreal and short kind of crime fiction book where people have like shark teeth and people rip their hearts out and the hearts go and do their own thing and stuff. Kind of magical realism type stuff. But it did really well and sold like 5,000 copies. And it won an award, for like best first or best novel, not best first novel, but best novel. So I hit this peak when I was 23, right? And what we talked about was that like writing's not a young person's game. It's more of like, you have to have this career where you are consistently putting art out and doing cool things. So I sort of just, nothing after that really reached that kind of peak. And so I was seeing diminishing returns with every book that I did, right? So my second book went from 5,000 to like 800. And then the book after that went from 800 to 500, and then so on and so forth, to the point where like books were literally coming out and like, they were doing like 100 copies in their first month. And so that was a kick to the ego. It was like an ego thing, right? It was like, oh, I was here and now I'm here. Even though both perspectives are, 5,000 copies isn't life-changing, sales or anything like that. But so I just needed to get a little bit of perspective. And I think where Kelby really helps with that is in the terms of, like, what are you fucking crying about? Like, I'm a new dad. My son is 16 months old. He's a pain in the ass sometimes. And occasionally I'll bitch about him, and Kelby be like, what are you going to do? You going to put him up for adoption? Like, what are you going to do? Like, what's the option here? Like, what are you going to do? You either do it or you don't. And I think that started to repair and also shed light on this ego-based art production, right? Art that's created with an expectation that there's going to be praise and an audience and people fawning over you and stuff like that. I had to divest myself of that as the end goal for art, and instead get back to why is it that when I was 7 years old and I saw Jurassic Park, I went home and wrote my own version of Jurassic Park and stapled it together and said that it was a book, right? I just did that because I thought it was fucking cool. So why not get back to that?
Now, you guys mentioned that you do this podcast, Agitator. The title's taken from the Takashi Miike film, right? So, this is the problem for me with a lot of these Japanese filmmakers is you take a look at like Takashi Miike's IMDb, and it says like he's directed 90 films or some
Mhm.
crazy amount like that,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
it's over 100 now. Yeah.
It's over 100. All right. How do you even begin to like look at the style of a director like that, or boil that down so you have some sort of expectation of what you're going to get?
That is a very good question. And I might have an answer, although it's very incomplete because a lot of Miike's films have not been released in the US.
Hmm.
But from the ones that I've seen, I think a good contrast to Miike would be Shinya Tsukamoto. So there's a book that was written by Tom Mess that was also called Agitator, that we also stole, that was an overview of Miike's films up to that time. He also wrote a book called Iron Man, which was over Shinya Tsukamoto. And in the book Agitator, there's a diary that Miike wrote while he was writing, or while he was directing, rather, Ichi the Killer. And he was comparing his shooting style to Tsukamoto's. So they're friends, and they would often use each other's sets to shoot their movies. So while Tsukamoto was shooting Bullet Ballet, Miike was shooting Ichi the Killer, and Miike got through his day, and I think he finished 8 or 10 scenes or something like that. And Tsukamoto was still working on one shot from Bullet Ballet. And Miike writes in his diary, he says, like, this is why I will never defeat him, right? Because he's more meticulous, he's more particular, he's more into the, this, that, and the other. Miike's style, because of that, actually comes from its anarchism and its ability to be fast, right? To be a little bit sloppy, um, to include completely tonally inconsistent ideas into a narrative where they shouldn't be. Whereas somebody like Tsukamoto, his films, I think, are these, well, 3 or 4 of his films are these perfect encapsulations of a vision, right? Like he has with Tetsuo, Tokyo Fist, Bullet Ballet, uh, maybe a
Kotoko.
few others. Kotoko is a good example of that, right? Like he's found this kind of perfect vision and distilled it. Miike is actually defined by his looseness, right? By his ability to genre hop and tone hop and put out this. I think a good example would be the way that a lot of indie rappers do their thing now,
Hmm.
where they put out 5 or 6 mixtapes a year, and it's just like they go into the booth and they whatever comes out of their head goes onto the mixtape. I think that Miike is actually closer to that. So what makes that interesting is that you get films that are less impressive, and then films like Gozu or Ichi the Killer or Audition that I think are classics. But then also once he gets bigger properties like Terraformers or something like that, he's able to take this kind of goofy sci-fi big budget thing and inject a little bit of that spirit into it, where some weird shit happens that wouldn't be present in a more constrained filmmaker's movie.
Okay. I think I follow what you're saying with that. It feels very early 20th century filmmaking, where you would have a lot of these guys like John Ford or even Hitchcock, where they have so many films under their belt that they've directed, and it's a very like workman approach. And I think in the West, with filmmaking, and ironically, you could probably make a case that Eastern filmmaking is superior right now, anyway, to Western filmmaking. The directors are a lot more precious with their work, and
Mm-hmm.
that was not always the case. Somebody like John Ford directed not nearly as many as Takashi Miike, but certainly quite a lot. I think he was also like in the 50s or 40s, 60s. I don't know. And that's not something that is really done anymore. And there's certainly outliers to that. That's not. I don't think that's a standard. I'm not that well versed on Japanese cinema. I'm constantly pointed to as like the guy who's like an Asian file or whatever by guests on the show or my co-host. But my knowledge for that is fairly limited in scope, especially compared to you two. And the director we're talking about tonight even though I think we're like 50 minutes, 45 minutes into the show. We haven't even mentioned his name probably. Park Chan-wook. He's only directed, I think, about 13 films. I did want to gauge what your level of knowledge and interest in his filmography
Well, I
is.
want to take this. I want to take this really quick because I think there's an interesting segue. I was watching Old Days, the documentary about Old Boy,
Mm.
and one thing that really struck me, I think, was they were talking about how when they were on set for Old Boy, there was a vibe to the whole thing. Everybody was excited about that project. People would talk about it constantly after the shooting was done. They'd go get some drinks and they were constantly talking about the script and how to make it better. And everybody was just into it. And I think that just to kind of wrap up my previous point, there's a muse, right? There is a muse and she shows up when she wants to. And some people choose to keep making movies when that muse isn't there, just to kind of keep the juices flowing. And other people are patient and they wait, more like Park Chan-wook, right? But I'm a so Old Boy. I bought the Tartan Asia Extreme DVD of it in 2003. I want to say from a Sam Goody, and it changed my whole shit, especially that hallway fight scene. I thought that was
Yeah.
like the coolest shit that I'd ever seen.
Tartan
Um,
was great. That I have fond memories for that brand. That's how I got introduced to a lot of Japanese films and Korean films
mm,
20 years ago. I didn't get the Tartan Old Boy. I actually got like off of Amazon. It was in retrospect, it was like a Chinese bootleg of it that they sold me
yeah,
for like
yeah,
15
yeah.
bucks.
The
But I
first,
got
yeah,
Battle Royale that way through Tartan
yeah,
Extreme.
yeah. The first Korean movie maybe that I ever saw was A Tale of Two Sisters
Okay.
from Tartan. But I'm very familiar. I think I've seen. I I haven't. I actually, funny enough, I haven't seen JSA, but I've seen most of his other movies: Old Boy, Thirst, I'm a Cyborg, The Handmaiden. Didn't see Stoker. Um, what else? Oh, all the Vengeance movies, right? Sympathy, Lady, and then this one. So I think I'm pretty caught up for the most part.
I've seen the Vengeance trilogy, um, which actually I would say is fucking classic and rewatchable as Old Boy is, and especially as like gleefully fucked up as that ending is. Um, I think Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is like my favorite of his still. Uh, I love raw energy of kind of, I know it wasn't his first movie, but like kind of like early beginnings of these kind of creative geniuses always have like uh that uninhibited like spark that
Yeah.
is hard to replicate afterwards. Um The Handmaiden, fucking I wrote an essay about The Handmaiden for a felonious Valentine's segment on the Hard Boiled Wonderland film blog. Uh, where are the other ones? This one
Have you seen Cyborg? I'm a Cyborg,
I
but that's
haven't
okay.
I haven't seen
That
Cyborg. I
one's
haven't
that
seen
one's
that
really
one.
good. Yeah, that one's and it's kind of different from. It's actually maybe one of the most Park Chan-wook movies that he's made. It's very very kind of orchestral and artistic, right? But
Mm.
it's really good. It's really good too. This one was good, I think.
That's my response to it. Is I think it's good. I think
Yeah.
it's I have some problems with it, but I enjoy every single one of his movies that I watch, even if I'm not vibing with them. To what you were saying, Kelby, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, definitely. There's this thing with filmmakers where it seems like they have their first movie and their second movie, and then they have their real first movie. So like with Kubrick, he did Fear and Desire and Killer's Kiss, but his real first movie feels like The Killing, and then he does Paths of Glory, and that's when he like develops his like texture as a filmmaker, as a director. With Park Chan Wook, I agree that it feels like Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is really where he gets into gear and he knows what he's doing as a director. He did a couple of films before that. The very first one, it was kind of hard to track down for a long period of time. Is called The Moon is the Sun's Dream, and he directed it, I think, when he was like 29 or 30 years old. It's a cheap budget. The acting is kind of whatever, but it's very like aesthetic in sort of like a Hong Kong cinema, late 1980s kind of way. The lighting is like aping that, and just the general feel of it. It's mob related and kind of, one of those types of like love stories. It's all right. And then he does a movie I have not seen. It's the only movie of his I haven't seen because there hasn't been English subtitles released of it. It's a film called Trio, and I guess it's a comedy. I guess it's a romantic comedy. That was very mid 90s. And then he does JSA. JSA is like the first one that really puts him on the map. And he has like disowned it. I bought the Arrow copy of it. Arrow did a restoration recently on 4K Blu-ray, and I think it's a pretty standard by the numbers like Korean political action thriller. And then he gets into the Vengeance trilogy, and I think then you're really getting good with the films.
Cooking with gas.
Yeah, this movie, Decision to Leave, feels like a few of his earlier movies. I was getting a lot of the vibes from like Thirst, if you guys have seen that movie, and maybe the Vengeance trilogy a smidge, but it feels, I don't want to say it feels devoid of style, because he's trying different things with the camera, and he's so clever sometimes with the shot composition and the editing, but there's something missing here. There's like just a veneer that you come to expect from Park Chan-wook's filmmaking that is not present. And another thing that really bothered me, and maybe this is just because I know that he got paid to do a short film earlier this year with the iPhone 13. There's so much product placement for Apple in this movie. It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
Just iPhones galore. It's ridiculous.
You see it from inside the iPhone, right? Like there's a shot from inside where you see the thumb go like this and click something.
So
no,
that got on my nerves, but yeah.
I think that like what's so interesting about not just Park Chan-wook actually, but Korean film in general, is that all their movies seem to be divided into perfect thirds, right? More so than American movies. And it's not following a Joseph Campbell hero's journey. It's like 3 separate short films that get put together. The best example of this is not a Park Chan-wook film, but have you seen The Wailing?
I think I have, but it's been maybe some time since I've seen it. When did it come out?
It came out in 2000 and...
Was it 16?
16? Yeah, 16, 17, something like that. But that's a movie that goes from like police procedural to comedy to cosmic horror. And it's got this, not cosmic horror, it's like satanic devil horror kind of thing. But Park Chan-wook seems to follow this path very similarly, where the first third of Decision to Leave is a noir action thriller. And he's even got the old boy hallway fight scene in the form of that, I guess, drone shot of them chasing each other across rooftops, which I thought was really cool. And then it moves into sort of the second half, where it's the end of your standard American movie. That's where it would end. He would find out that this, Chinese woman killed her husband, and you lied to me. And then that would just be it. And then there's another third, which is let's jump, 18 months in the future and kind of see what happens. But in terms of the style of it, I think that your product placement criticism is really valid, because I think that there's a real problem right now with cell phones in movies and how easy they make some things to have happen, but how completely uninteresting they are, right? Like when he goes through the old woman's cell phone to find out that on this day she took steps when she's not supposed to take steps. There's nothing interesting or organic about that, right? It's like, it's a fucking phone. We all deal with these stupid things. So I think that might be a part of what makes it feel so kind of like, maybe if cell phones didn't exist, this would be interesting.
And it's so much of the plot. So much of the plot has to do with the iPhone 13 and disposing
and him texting his girlfriend behind his wife's back. Yeah.
it's like a whole third of the movie is that, and I don't know. It bugged me a little bit. You know, I did watch his. He did a short film back in like 2008 or 2009, and this was the first time he took Apple's money, and he shot a short film called Night Fishing with the iPhone 4. And I watched that right before I watched Decision to Leave, and even that shot on the iPhone 4 is just like, you know, visually, you know, the flair of that is so much greater than this movie, which is not even to say that I dislike this movie. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars on Letterboxd or something. But for one of his films, I guess I've just come to expect more. And I really enjoyed The Handmaiden. I think everybody enjoyed The Handmaiden. Um, yeah, so it just kind of felt like, all right, you're retreading some steps you've already taken. You're not really saying anything new or different with this movie. Um, you know, what is this all about? It seems like I don't know. It seems like a step back um, from his potential post Handmaiden.
I think I'd enjoy it more watching it a second time because those expectations are kind of like, and I did like it, but I had to like come to terms with what it was and
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't gonna really blow me away or whatever, or even have that like missing. And maybe by the end of this, we'll be able to articulate what about the what wookism is missing from it, um, because there was just some element that like I forgot it was a Park Chan-wook movie like halfway through watching it, and then remember like on the pirate site I was watching, saw the little like, you know, my screen minimized and I saw his name in the credits there before I fixed the screen and was like, oh yeah, it's a Park Chan-wook movie. Forgot. But because it does do some interesting things with setting up, um I mean the movie itself, we're coming at it with the expectations we have of Park Chan-wook, but in the movie, if you'd never seen a Park Chan-wook film, it's also giving you false expectations by presenting you with like this sort of detective story that turns into this romance in a weird way. He's like bumbling this case on purpose to keep getting closer to who he knows she's the murderer within like 10 minutes of the movie, and the rest of its 2 hour plus runtime he's kind of like trying to maintain a relationship with her. And uh I mean that is an interesting flip on the kind of cat and mouse thing of being like,
But if that got more interesting, right? Like if she kept doing things and he kept progressively having to cover up for what she was
right,
doing, and like,
Yeah.
and his, that would have been, I think, a more interesting, intense direction for it to go to. Whereas in this, it seems like nobody really cares. It's like, well, she didn't do it. Why?
that's
Because I
when it
said so.
does get more interesting, right? Which it happens kind of like rhythmically a little late, is when she does do it again. Like she kills her next husband
She
in the
sets him up.
pool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And does she
She sets him up. Yeah. She kills the guy's mom and gets the crazy Chinese drug dealer who said, if my mother dies, I'm going to kill your husband. So
right,
she
right.
she gives her one of those little fentanyl pills that she has to kill her, that sets the guy off to stab him to death. But yeah, no, I mean, like, that's it needed something to kind of ramp it up. I think the time jump was really weird. I think that I get that he was trying to tell a love story with this, but it kind of, when it all starts happening at the end, not to like just jump right into it, and we can do spoilers on this podcast,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
Yeah. Like when she's talking to him in the car and she's saying that, I knew that you loved me at this point, which is when he was covering up evidence about her. And she was like, but love is a thing that you can't say, or it stops existing, and then kills herself. I thought that was all very poetic and kind of devastating, right? Like, I've been in sort of a funk the past couple of days after watching that ending, because I think the ending is so well done, but there's nothing going on, right? That that keeps it going. I actually thought this was going to be Park Chan-wook's kind of Paul Verhoeven Basic Instinct movie, and I got something very different.
That would have been a much better direction for it to go in. You're right. It just kind of meanders throughout the entire middle section of the film and doesn't do anything that's striking for, I guess, his work. You see so many different, more dysfunctional relationships in his other movies that are probably just as believable as this one. That I don't know. It feels gutless.
Right, because like Thirst is like that, right?
Yeah.
Where the guy, like, this girl that he's into becomes a vampire, and like she keeps escalating the stakes that he has to keep cleaning it up. So if that kind of idea was applied to this movie, it might have worked a little bit better.
Like there's elements of this that are even found in Stoker, and that wasn't a script of his. That was from, I think, Wentworth Miller, who was the star of Prison Break. And it's even, and I consider that one of his like low tier films. It's probably done better, or at least more interesting in that movie. I don't know. What is your not really related to Park Chan-wook, but I guess kind of a bit. What are your thoughts on Bong Joon-ho? Because he obviously had Parasite blow up in 2019, and prior to Parasite, I think I maybe only enjoyed one or two of his films, and I felt like the reputation he had garnered here in America was kind of undeserved, and Park Chan-wook should have been that guy, But I don't know. After this movie, I'm kind of like, damn, did you fall off, dude? Are you done? Are you washed up? But yeah, I just want to get you guys' thoughts on Bong Joon-ho as a director.
I love Memories of Murder. I think that's a great movie.
Which the lead guy in this movie is the suspect in Memories of Murder.
Really?
20 years ago. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Okay.
Until right before this show. Because I was like, this lead, and maybe that's a problem too, is you don't have a lot of Park Chan-wook's regulars. The bodyguard from Old Boy is the dead husband, I believe, at the beginning of the film. He pops up on the phone lock screen. And there might be like one other player who pops up in many of his films. But yeah, the protagonist in this film is the murder suspect from Memories of Murder.
Not a good leading guy. That was actually that's my biggest criticism of this movie, was that the leading man does not seem. He looks like he would be the kind of guy who goes home, has a little bit of soju and like listens to Bach or something, and then goes to sleep. He doesn't. He has nothing about him that says insomniac detective about him, right? Like there's nothing gritty or interesting about this guy. But I did like Parasite. I know that Parasite got a bunch of praise when it came out, and then there was some Parasite revisionism, but I thought it was really good. I liked Pig. I like Snowpiercer. Bong Joon-ho he's fine to me, but I would agree that Park Chan-wook is kind of an infinitely more talented filmmaker.
And he has an annoying reputation in America because when I started seeing Americans really latch on to Bong Joon-ho was from I like and even love the majority of what I've seen of his, but his dog shit movie Okja that was on Netflix was when I really saw people like talking Bong Joon-ho this and Bong Joon-ho that. And then when Parasite came out, it was like from that sect of people, like the majority normie America seemed to be like, oh, the guy who directed Okja, and not just like
that's the Pig movie I liked. I liked Okja.
David likes a bunch of garbage ass movies though.
I do. Yeah.
He was like, you see Turning Red?
The Criterion Collection agrees with you. They took in Okja recently, the Criterion Collection. So
Criterion did?
Yes.
That's what's up. History will vindicate me.
But yeah, I saw, who did I see? I think it was was it even Hans maybe, who made a Twitter post recently that was calling Bong Joon-ho the Korea's Joss Whedon or
No,
something.
Is that Blower, guys?
that was Blower. Yeah, Blower
Oh
did
yeah.
it. Mhm.
I I mean I can see where that's um
I don't agree with the Bong Joon-ho slander. I think he's a good filmmaker. I think his movies are fun. I think
yeah, I
that
don't think it's
it's
his fault. Like
right.
I don't want to put any blame on him.
And I
I
do
think
think Parasite is really good. I think Parasite's a really good movie. I think that it escalates in like a kind of cool Hitchcockian sort of way. Um, the ending doesn't necessarily uh, deliver on what it builds up to, but I thought it was pretty cool. I liked that movie.
I thought it was great as well. And this is a clear instance of like you have to separate the fan base, or rather the American fan base, from the director in this case, because it makes me not want to like anything of his when I see people fawning over him on Twitter, and it's always like that particular crowd of people. But I find him to be very hot and cold, and I have this hang up in general, but especially with him because he tries to do these big international epics. Like Snowpiercer is one of these movies where he's like, we're going to grab American actors and English actors and French actors, and we're going to use Korean actors. And I think when he tries to do that, he overshoots it and winds up failing. And I thought what was great about Parasite is he kept it Korean. He returned back to that. Okja's another one like that, where he's got like a giant panel of different international stars. Parasite is just kind of like a local story for him, and I thought he
Mhm.
nailed it. And I really enjoy many of his early films, like Mother and
Mother's great.
Mother's amazing.
The
Yeah.
host is amazing. I mean, like they're really solid, well-made movies that are made with that more Korean sensibility that feels just a little bit different from American movies that I think made him really kind of take off. But Mother, I'm trying to figure out what I think his best movie is. It's either Mother or Memories of Murder. It's one of those two. But Mother's really good. Um, Especially that scene where she is in the like the machine operators like shop, right?
mm,
And it's kind of like that's like the suspect dude. Uh, yeah, either Mother or Memories of Murder or The Host. Those early three are really good.
People try to like take back the host, the ones who are like big fans of Okja, Snowpiercer, and then of course Parasite. The like American annoying fan base has tried to like claim the host as one of these. He's a political director,
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
Like he
I do
is
hate
mm.
that. Yeah,
making,
yeah.
and it's like the host is about how all these like it's really a story about the father in a lot of ways
Yeah,
who is like I mean the main core. I remember watching that movie thinking like this is about a father who was like these fucking kids. Where did I go wrong?
mm-hmm.
It's not like a celebration of their libtardism or
Mm.
whatever, you know. It's like
Well, and I think that's where the backlash from Parasite comes from, right? Because, it's clearly a social commentary thing going on. And he's got like the Indian headdress on at the end, which could be read a certain way, I guess. But I don't know, man. I just thought it was a good movie. I just had a fun time at the movies when I saw Parasite. So, I mean, same with Oakja. I know there's like heavy, like animal rights shit going on with that, but I thought it was goofy and fun. It kind of reminded me of Southland Tales in a way. Um, so like that might be his Southland Tales.
Do you guys think that Asian cinema, and when I say Asian cinema, I really just mean Japanese and Korean, has reached a point where there might be any sort of decline similar to how Western cinema has
Mm-hmm.
been going?
Yes, I went to Seoul a few years ago. I spent a month in Seoul, and I feel like Seoul is going through this beautiful renaissance. Probably what America looked like in the 80s, where
Mm-hmm.
people just go out and they drink and they buy shit, and it's this whole materialist thing. But the crash is coming. And with that crash will come the artistic crash as well. So, yes, we're going to get a lot of, especially after Squid Game, uh, which I feel might have been astroturfed a little bit. Anything that comes from a streaming service, I feel like it's astroturfed. Um, because like, how can you watch all that and then at the end you have a protagonist with like bright red hair like that and not think that it's like the goofiest shit that you've ever seen, but like they did it anyway.
Did you notice
Um,
like his face really got like flared up with acne as well? And I
uh-huh,
don't know if that was intentional or not, but I
uh-huh.
just kept looking at his face. I was like, damn, dude, he have cystic acne? He was hiding all this time, or what's with his face? Why does he look like Two Face all of a sudden?
It's because the Squid Game stressed him out. But I think that Squid Game actually might be the turning point that you're talking about for Korean cinema, at least, where we're going to start seeing more dog shit come out of Korea, um, which
And
is a shame.
Na Hong Jin kind of disappeared, didn't he? Like I haven't seen since The Wailing. You brought that up. That was like almost 7 years ago now.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
was like the dude. Like he did The Chaser, the
Mhm.
Yellow
Yellow
Sea,
Sea. Yep.
and I saw
Mhm.
the X-rated version of the Yellow Sea
Dude,
because
that fight scene with the hammer in Yellow Sea is so hard.
fuck.
It's so good. Um, yeah, no, I don't. I mean, it's all this corporate takeover, right, of things that makes everything worse. And once they found out they can make millions of dollars by just kind of being Korean, uh, it's going to make everything suck that much worse.
K-pop, right?
Yeah.
Did K-pop ruin Korean
Mm.
cinema?
My wife loves K-pop so much. She had tickets to BTS, which is a big K-pop group. That got canceled because of COVID. So it's the one good thing that COVID did. But
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I feel like there was a point where you could check out like any big Korean adult like crime film for a period of time, and you'd be able to take something away from it, even if it wasn't the best. Whether that be like good acting or performances or just I don't know some maybe story element that sticks out is different. But you check out anything that's on Netflix, for example, because Netflix has a big international audience, obviously. So they throw a bunch of Indian stuff and Korean stuff and whatever it might be. You check out anything on there that's been hyped as like, ooh, this is like a good action film, crime thriller. And it sucks. It's all dreck. It feels the same thing as like the American ones that they throw up on there. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen that Miles Teller, what is it, Chris Hemsworth movie that just came out on there. I don't even remember the title. It's all shit. It's all just very generic by the numbers, kind of predictable. The humor is always the same. It's it's kind of taking shape. I think in a different way in Korea, but that sort of expectedness is really settling in.
you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to follow up on, and now might be a good time. You mentioned films having texture.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
I guess it goes a little bit beyond just aesthetic. I look at
Mm.
filmmakers and sometimes writers as having like texture periods, like Spike Lee, for example. When we were talking earlier about, sometimes, spiritually, the first film is not the first film. It might be the third or fourth film that they do.
Mm.
If you take a look at his work, he has a certain texture period in the early 90s, or I guess it starts in 89 with Do the Right Thing. And then you see Mo Better Blues, which has like, it has nothing to do with Do the Right Thing. It's not even like the same time period, same scene, but there's just that directorial style that's embedded in there that carries through no matter what he's covering. And then you see it in Jungle Fever and Crooklyn and Malcolm X, and it kind of stops after a while because he tries to do something a little bit different. He gets a little more money. He's doing like Nike commercials, Michael Jordan commercials. He does Summer Sam. He does
I do like that movie. I
it.
thought that one was good.
It's. I mean, a lot of his movies from that period are overlooked or they don't get the credit that they're worth. He Got Game is another great film,
That's a good one.
um,
Yeah.
and then it comes to a halt again. That's its own like thing, and you have like all these different periods of varying styles where even if it has nothing to do with like there's no connecting elements, there's still something there. There's still something to that you can point to or feel or pick up on. So there's like these different things. I feel like with Park Chan-wook, the Vengeance trilogy up to maybe Thirst, is sort of like one texture period
Mm.
in his filmmaking. In his filmmaking, so I don't know. I don't know if I'm communicating that
No,
well.
I think
I don't know,
so. In
but
writing, it comes across in like in content. Well, I guess in any art medium, it content is part of it, like what is actually in the thing.
mm,
But also, like in writing, it kind of comes across in like voice. Um, in music, you can get the texture is a little more obvious because it's just auditory. You're hearing like this music doesn't have as much drums as it used to, or whatever. Uh, but film is like this cocktail of all different things going on, and you can just tell that the cocktail is like watered down like a lot. Like there's not that richness, that spike to it, that age to it. There's It's kind of like the reason like with a good podcast, you're never going to uh what's what's the word? Uh you're never gonna explain yourself, cushion your statement. Yeah, you're not gonna
Equivocate.
quit. You're not gonna equivocate. I'm legitimately retarded. You're not gonna equivocate, right? When you are performing in a podcast radio medium, because people hate hearing that shit. Um, Film has, like, modern film kind of has this equivocation that
Ooh, I like that.
you can sense in the way it's everything. It's not just the content. It's not just the obvious diversity hires and the wrong roles. It's not just the screenwriting. I mean, it's all of it. It's
mhm.
not just the way it's shot. You can just feel that they're so on edge. Like it's like the director, the production company has a gun to their head and is like, you better not let any teeth show in this.
Is it possible that when is it possible that these people ran out of ideas? Like, is Park Chan-wook out of ideas? Was Spike Lee out of ideas? He hasn't made anything good. Uh, the Five Bloods and the Sweet Blood of Jesus and
Oh,
all
the
this
Sweet
shit.
Blood of
Like,
Jesus was, oh, that was atrocious. That was
it's
horrible.
it's it's just, is
I
he out of
contributed.
ideas though? Like, is
I
it just
hmm.
a thing where like he like, is there a time where you should be like David Lynch and start building cabinets and waiting and then eventually make the return, which is brilliant, and then do nothing because you don't have anything to say? Like, do these people get caught in this? And as artists, should we be cognizant of this? The idea that you get caught in this, constant production churn of things when you really should just shut the fuck up for 10, 15, 20 years and then do something else.
I think it's possible. I think it depends. I mean, it's obviously case by case.
Mm-hmm.
There's examples of that rule for certain, and I do think there's examples that go against that. But it also depends on who you're collaborating with, who you're working with. Um, Kevin Smith, for
Who's
example.
who's your most consistent filmmaker
That's
who
a good
just like
question.
throughout their career just banger after banger, and even when they're not a banger it's still kind of a banger?
Would you say like currently active filmmaker or?
Sure. I would think of somebody like Cronenberg, or for me, well, I can't even really say that about Miike because he's been directing like girl group music videos and shit. Like, so I can't even say that about my favorite. I mean, Shinya Tsukamoto's last three movies have been dog shit on a level that is just, it's unbelievable that this is the guy who made Tetsuo and Tokyo Fist, the guy who made Nightmare Detective, made Bullet Ballet. It's like, it's almost unfathomable to me. So like it's hard. But yeah, Lynch, Cronenberg, maybe. Tarantino.
I think
Yeah,
Tarantino
yeah,
is.
Tarantino. That's also because his output is so concentrated and spaced out. Like
Yeah.
he's not going to half-ass anything that he does. it's tough to say among like active filmmakers who might fit that role.
Sony, well, Hold the Dark. He went to Hold the Dark, and then it was shitty.
Yeah.
So, so he had two. Sony had two movies.
Mhm.
But like, do people? I guess this is a deeper artistic question because Kelby and I talk often about being these production powerhouses. We're very inspired by the work of an author named Stephen Graham Jones, who has put out 50, 60 books and just keeps like chunking them out, and they're always good.
Always good. Yeah. And
But
that's like he's a good example of like kind of um what I was saying with the equivocation thing and relating it to like voice and writing. In writing, he has that voice, why it's so consistent. And Mike is consistent in like how it feels like Mike did it, even if it's like I'm not watching this girl superhero sort of weird, questionably chosen thing that you
Tsukamoto not
directed.
so much, but yes, Mike, yes.
Mike, yeah, it does still have that Mike-ism to it, and yeah, Jones is that way 100%. Like his shit
So
reads.
the question is like, with somebody like Jones, he keeps having ideas, they keep being bangers. Other people, and maybe this is me, right? Like maybe some of us have like 10 good ideas, and and you have to parse out how you present those 10 good ideas, because Decision to Leave is for how good it is and for all the things I like about it, it's a movie that could not exist, right? Like I wouldn't want a world where Old Boy doesn't exist, or Sympathy, or Lady, or even Thirst, or even, or especially like Cyborg, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like Decision to Leave is so disappointing because it's a movie that if it never got made and somebody in a Borgesian alternate reality sense was to write a fake review about Decision to Leave, you'd be like, well, so who cares? Who cares that one didn't get made? It doesn't matter.
Right. I don't even think it, peels back his reputation at all. Because, I mean, I think there's something where if this was more of a flop, I think that he actually won like a Best Director award at
Sure.
Cannes or
Yeah,
Venice or
I
one of
think it
these
was
big
Cannes,
festivals.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
If it had flopped, if there was this kind of lukewarm reaction similar to what we're having, he might feel like he has to prove himself and come back a little bit harder the next time around. But it's not. They're so eager to pat him on the back. And I think that's dangerous for somebody as talented as Park Chan-wook. Now, as far as like anyone who's delivering like a consistent output, to your question before, the closest that comes to mind for me anyway, I don't know how you guys feel about this guy, is maybe like Lars von Trier, where
Yeah,
at
sure.
least his movies are interesting, even if they're not
Yeah.
particularly good.
Safdie brothers have been
Yeah,
good so far.
there it's the book is yet to be written on those guys as far, and
Yeah,
I love them.
it's early. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's early.
but
Yeah.
they've only they just kind of developed their style. Good Time is their first film, even if it's not their first film, right? So
Yeah.
we'll see.
As long
They're
as long as
shooting-
Necro is in their movies, I think they'll be good. Necro's their muse.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're doing another movie in January with Sandler. It's going to be a sports film, so that's where they're going next. Lars von Trier is probably my closest, truest answer to that. I would want it to be Refn. Nicholas Winding Refn was my favorite director for a period of time, and Too Old to Die Young was I mean, he's a very indulgent director, but that was just that was too far for me, and it became Park. Park's my favorite director now. But I'm interested in. Have you guys seen the trailer to his series that's going to Netflix?
I'm very interested because so the Refn thing is super interesting because Too Old to Die Young got so many people fired at Amazon. It was this huge disaster where Amazon basically gave people money to make these auteur films. There was Too Old to Die Young, there was Tokyo Vampire Hotel and with Sion Sano
Yep.
and a few others. And they did so poorly that a lot of people's careers were wrecked with that. And it's so I I'm fascinated by the kind of magnetism that somebody like a Refn has to be able to go to Netflix and be like, hey, I just destroyed your competitors. I destroyed them so bad that they had to put $1 billion into a Lord of the Rings series that nobody likes. Uh, so how about it? How about give me like $20 million? I'll make something cool. And they're like, okay, yeah. I mean, you're good. So that kind of charisma and magnetism is super interesting to me. Um, I'm looking forward to it. I love his movies. I think that the Lars von Trier thing is really interesting because he did you watch that interview with him, that video interview where like he's sick and he's dying, and he's like,
Is it the one
this
where he's
is
in a bathrobe and he's shaking?
yeah, I think well it starts off he's fishing and then yeah, I think that's in there. But basically the idea is that like he's coming up on the end, um, and he knows it, and I don't know. Yeah, he made them count. I I wasn't blown away by the house that Jack built. Um, I thought that one was I don't know, that one just didn't come together for me. Did you like that one?
I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was his funniest movie. So that's really won me
It is
over.
it is pretty funny. It's funny, especially at the end where he has them all in like that kind of like Mexican standoff, like kind of they're all sort of just like posed with guns
Yeah.
aimed at them and shit
It's
like
so
that.
absurd. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really enjoyed that aspect of it. I found Matt Dillon hilarious in that movie.
Or where
So
he's like sniping that lady's kid. They're on like the hunting range and shit.
mhm.
Just fucking blows the kid's head off. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
it's so over the top in a way that only Lars really has an interest in doing. I don't think it's his best. A lot of his recent films, everything like post Antichrist, has kind of been like its own thing in his filmography, and they all have like this sort of Tarantino novel-esque feel to them, where they're just enormous think pieces of his. Um, and I would probably cite Nymphomaniac, just both volumes, as maybe the strongest of that.
oh, that's definitely his best movie for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nymphomaniac 1 and 2. Or Antichrist. Those two are like neck and neck for me. But
Hmm.
yeah.
I love Antichrist. I also love everything. You brought up Ref, and I would change my answer to him. Actually, you were like, Refn is consistent as fuck in my book. I loved Too Old to Die Young as a troll film.
Yeah. Yeah, me
Hmm.
too.
The I mean, I don't really want to rewatch it because that was a torture that I willingly sat through, but uh, there were enough payoffs for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think his whole metamorphosis from being like this gritty masculine filmmaker to I'm gonna have like violent, beautiful, feminine art pieces, and those are gonna be my movies, is very unique and very different from a lot of his contemporaries. The Pusher trilogy is still, I think, to this day, just infinitely watchable. Excellent
Pusher 2 in
filmmaking.
particular is
Yeah,
just like so
Yeah,
good. That's the
yeah.
best one. Yeah. Like the kind of film nerdy arty answer is Pusher 3 because
Hmm.
Pusher 3 has a lot of cool shit in it. But Pusher 2 is just like the pure cinema movie that he made. Like that's really good. But I mean, my favorite is Drive. It's the boring one. It's the boring one.
and
I thought
that
that was great.
the Pusher trilogy features the lack of that filmic equivocation that I
Mm-hmm,
was trying to
mm-hmm.
express because it has the visual texture to it with the more, the less digitally clean look. It also has the like sort of naturalistic acting that's not overacting, not method acting, not like it just feels like the people exist as the characters that they are. You've got scripts full of casual slurs being tossed around, which I just think I love seeing it, not because of some like Yeah, I love saying nigger. It's just like
You do love
it,
saying that, though, by the way.
but it's just people say it, and in certain um groups you can get by not saying. I saw something recently that was really interesting that pointed out uh Method Man in the past, like, I want to say 10, maybe they said even the past 20 years, Method Man has not cursed in a single verse, which is crazy because Method Man, right? Like, I'm gonna cut up in your throat and start fucking it, and like Method Man. Um, so there are ways to uh, get around certain content without feeling like you're toothless, and I think it comes from intent. Like, if you were walking on eggshells, that's gonna register.
Yeah.
If you're just doing shit, like you said with Refn, his whole thing with the like powerful female, it feels like it's coming from a place of like, I don't know, it's not coming from a place of like, oh, I need to like have a strong woman, you know, portrayed in my films. Now it feels like it's coming from a more genuine place wherever it's coming from. It doesn't register as that kind of like pandering, you know, as much as like some of the more cushy, especially with like crime films these days. It's like people, they're not edgy enough for any of this to for me to buy any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will never have a bad word to say about Nicholas Winding Refn because he published me and he paid me the most money that I've ever made from writing something that I've ever been paid.
What
So
did he
all of his
publish?
films are on his site, on the Buy NWR site. He published one of my novellas.
Oh,
He
nice.
really loved it and put it up there. It's called Oklahoma Heartland USA. And yeah, I got my money on time, and it was way more money than I make from indie publishing. So all of his films are fantastic. I have no notes about any of them.
That's awesome. I'm going to check that out
Mhm.
once we wrap up here, which we should probably do now. It's almost 1 o'clock here. So,
Sure. Yeah.
all
Okay.
right. We hardly talked about the movie, but you don't need to see it if you're listening to this show. It's just kind of whatever. It's fine.
It's a noir movie where the cop falls in love with the femme fatale, and they they do their thing.
Yeah. All right.
Best suicide scene though. That was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
wild ass suicide scene.
It's a crazy way to commit suicide.
All right, fellas. It's been great having you two on, and I'd like to do something in the future with you guys, maybe with Hans here. Hans present for the show. So
Sure.
we'll have to figure that out. Sorry for all the rescheduling issues and almost again tonight. But all right, where can people find you online for those who are listening right now? Where do you want to direct them?
I'm at Heathenish Kid on Twitter. I think you can pretty much link up there and wherever else I want you to find me at. You can chase the rabbit hole if you'd
Yep.
like.
At Twitter, BRBJDO. Come follow me. Read
All right.
Broken River books. That's it. That's all I got.
Terrific. All right. If you want to send me a link or something, I'll include that in the description as well.
Cool.
Again, it's been a pleasure talking about Asian cinema with you guys. So that has been movies for this week. Thank you for listening. I can't kill this call. My mouse is dead. Oh, shit. All right. We're back. Okay.